everybody, Steve the Amateur Historian. I'm about to venture deep into the underground annals of the city of Portland. But in reality, I'm just trying to get down to the river for a fresh episode of Historic Murders. Of Portland. Always a rough walk through all these little overpasses and whatnot. You never know what you're going to encounter. I should know I filmed a film down in this area. Filmed a little bit over here, filmed a little bit back this way. And that was a constant concern of mine, bringing acting talent and crew out to this area, is are we going to get messed with? But it was essential to get me to where I am now. Now, I did a film about a guy named Cash Weir who was arrested for murdering someone, only for everyone to later find out that the main witness in the case was just lying. And I need to get to the pathway, the Esplanade. It's on the other side of the freeway here. And when I first came up here to do that, there's a path leading down to it right up here. And when I got there, it was fenced off. Now, I later read that they were doing maintenance work, and that's why it was blocked off. So I'm assuming it doesn't just get closed down when the cold weather gets here, which is dumb because, no, I see people running on it. Whew! Thank God, that was my biggest concern. So I need to get down there. Otherwise, this video's a wash. So, I was about to do my intro. It's too damn loud up here. So we're just gonna have to, the traffic's just gonna be there. And helicopters. Everything that can make noise is surrounding us right now. Anyway, for our sake, it's August 15th, 1910. And we've got a guy named Jesse Hale. I think his real name was Jesse Burke, but Jesse Hale was the name he was going under in Portland. I think he moved here from back east, like a lot of people do and did. And he worked down by the Willamette River here because he was a fireman for the city. And he actually worked pretty much right dead in front of me right here. As shown by this street marker here, this is the foot of Southeast Washington Street. It would have come out right here, is where it would have met the river. Now, Washington Street actually ends, a block or two over that way because there's a freeway in the way now, but back before all that kind of hubbub existed. And even on the west side of the river, which you can see has a seawall now because the city would flood every year during the winter, so they're like, well, we got to do something about this. But all the streets on that side of the river, they all kind of became docks that just kind of went down into the river. So Washington Street would have literally done the same down here. You can even see, because I've actually walked down here before, these old remains that I think there was, you can find the big rings that people would like tie their boats to. A lot of old remains of ports and docking spots right here along Washington Street. And this is also, as this sign denotes, this is where the Stark Street Ferry came in. That was one of the primary methods people used to get from the west side of the river to the east side of the river, to the east side of the river back to the west side. As you know, now we have several bridges for cars to cross, but way back in the day, there wasn't, you didn't have your pick, so you usually had to take a ferry to get from one side to the other. I also noticed this very kind of Portland thing. There's a bunch of random padlocks hooked to the fence right here. I don't know what that means, but it's just a very Portland thing. Yeah, just lots of old dock remains kind of left here. This is very close. The Cash Weir story I was telling you about happened like right over there, pretty much right under the Morrison Bridge here, I think just to the other side of it. And then you turn, and right here's the end of Washington, or where the end of Washington Street would be. So it would be right in this area that Jesse Hale, there was as reported in the newspaper, it was like a fire department. It was like they had a specific fire boat here, and they had like a little headquarters there. I almost envisioned there just being kind of like a tiny building that, you know, a few firefighters are stationed at, maybe with the specific objective to deal with things where they actually had to get into a fire boat and go somewhere. And on the night of August 15th, Jesse Hale came down here, or I assume he was working a shift down here at these headquarters, when a Mrs. Aurliss Richardson shows up, the wife of a man named Aurliss Richardson. Because again, in the old days, a lot of newspapers never gave people's wives' names. It was always just Mrs., the guy's last name, or it'd be Mrs. and then the man's full name. Mrs. Aurliss Richardson. She came down here to meet with Jesse Hale, because despite being a married woman, Mrs. Richardson and Jesse Hale had reportedly, the newspapers made it like it was a sure thing, but now I'm not so sure after going through the whole story, but it was implied that they had a relationship going, and the fact that she was randomly coming down here and meeting him at his place of work kind of does add to that idea that, you know, they maybe were fooling around. She always denied it, but what she didn't realize, or didn't care about, is that her husband, Aurliss Richardson, who was a real son of a bitch, again, after reading through the whole story, he either knew or became thoroughly convinced that she, his wife, was sleeping around with Jesse Hale. So he was just eating up at him, you know, like all men, now or way back then, eat you up inside. And, you know, some of it is, I love my wife, I don't want to lose her, I care too much about her, I don't want to lose her to this bastard. But then a lot of it is, I'm a man and you're a woman, how dare you, you know, do this to me. There's a lot of toxic masculinity, a lot of it to go around. So Aurliss Richardson sees his wife leave, immediately assumes she's going down to meet Jesse Hale, and since Jesse Hale worked at a headquarters down here, you know, it'd be one of the likely spots that she would go to. So Aurliss Richardson trailed his wife to this site, and it seems almost as quickly as she got inside and met Jesse Hale, Aurliss Richardson came charging in, gun in hand. His wife, you know, saw him first, freaked, split, managed to escape with her life. And the funny thing is, reportedly this affair had been going on for months and months. And yet, apparently, Aurliss Richardson and Jesse Hale had only actually seen one another like once or twice. Like, they'd barely ever seen each other. You almost have to question if they even knew that one another even existed. So Jesse Hale, knew who Aurliss Richardson was. We knew that the woman he was seeing was a married woman. So Aurliss Richardson comes in, and Jesse Hale sees him when he first comes in, but he doesn't recognize him because they've barely ever seen each other. So he's kind of like, who's that? And then, when it's too late and Aurliss Richardson is stepping forward, all of a sudden, Jesse Hale sees a man with a gun. Richardson lifts the weapon. I was going to say rifle, but it was probably a handgun, like most of these cases. Quickly, boom, 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 fired 4 shots into Jesse Hale's body. Put him down on the ground. And Jesse Hale managed to survive for a little while, but he died just a short while later after being gunned down again at the headquarters that was somewhere here-ish, nearby where the foot of Washington Street would come down to the river. So, you'd think fairly open and shut case. At least you'd think. A man is pissed. There were so many dysfunctional marriages, so many husbands and wives who were alcoholics, they were drug dependent, they were dope fiends, morphine addicts. Lots of people flat broke, living from flop house to flop house. Just a world of instability. So you think, okay, the wife got sick of her husband's crap. She started seeing another man who made her a little bit more happy. He found out about it, went and shot him. So in a way, it's kind of like there's a little bit of guilt to go around for both people. There's guilt to go around for Aurliss Richardson, obviously, as a cold-blooded murderer, and his wife for cheating on him when, responsibly you should just, if you're not happy with your husband, you should just break it off. So you think she should have broke it off with her husband instead of cheating behind his back. But the full story has a little bit more to offer, where you really see that Aurliss Richardson was really above and beyond everyone else, and beyond the fact that he was a killer. He was a real scumbag for the way he behaved. So here's the full backstory of how we come to this place and time, and how Aurliss Richardson ends up showing up with a gun and killing Jesse Hale out of rage and jealousy and who knows what other kind of emotions, for him perceivably hooking up with his wife. Again, something his wife claimed never actually happened, but believe what you want. I'm about 70% of the feeling that they were fooling around with each other. So, again, this is dead of summer 1910. Back in 1908, this came out after the shooting. Aurliss Richardson and his wife had been married. Aurliss Richardson reportedly developed the belief that he was developing consumption, which was a pretty serious thing back in the day. And because of this, he left his wife. I don't know if he told her he was leaving, or if he was like, I need to go somewhere for a while to get help, I need a new environment, but whatever the case, for about 7 months he left his wife and went down to Southern California. And I think maybe the presumption he was, or the explanation he was putting forward was that he needed that to help cure himself so he wouldn't get worse or die or whatever. Because plenty of people died of consumption back in the day. But I don't know if I really buy that. It doesn't seem like he ever actually determined beyond any doubt that he had consumption. It was more that he feared he had consumption or was developing it or whatever. It seems like he was just looking for an excuse to just break away from marriage for a while and go down to California and have some fun. So he disappears for over half a year. And they interview him after the murder about how he comes home after just abandoning his wife, literally abandoning her. The reason she met Jesse Hale was because she had to take on boarders at their house because her husband, the main breadwinner, just split and left her high and dry. And Jesse Hale was actually reportedly a boarder that she took on at their home so she could actually keep a roof over her head. So again, real scumbag. But he comes home, Aurliss Richardson, he comes home and he's stunned that his wife is not happy to see him. And he claims that, their marriage stays like this from the moment he comes home. Like, the moment he comes home and is like, hey, honey, I'm here. She's like, oh. Like, she almost didn't expect him to come back and was getting to a point where she was hoping he wouldn't come back. And she pretty much was like, oh, well, turn yourself around and get out. Like, you abandoned me. Which he did. He abandoned her. I seriously doubt he actually had consumption. I think that was just a bunch of bullshit so he could escape his marriage for a while and have, you know, another wild adventure as a presumably a bachelor of some kind. So their marriage is completely on the rocks. Again, now I don't know how great their marriage was before he left, but obviously his actions made their marriage horrible. And I don't even know why they stayed together, but, you know, Aurliss Richardson at that point, he just couldn't understand why his wife would be so pissed at him for abandoning her, pretty much to a life of poverty. So, of course, he put sole responsibility, not on himself. It wasn't remotely his fault that his wife fell into the arms of another man, or possibly other men. You know, she was apparently taking on multiple, you know, single male boarders at her home, and I don't know what happened during those times, but Aurliss Richardson exclusively put the blame for his crumbling marriage on Jesse Hale and his wife. And even after killing them, he had absolutely no remorse, which of course didn't help him in the conviction afterward. He also, you know, he said full out he intended to show up and kill both Hale and his wife. But she, of course, saw him and recognized him better than Hale, and she saw him, screamed and bailed. She saw the gun come out and was like, oh man, we're all going to die. And she bailed. So she managed to escape with her life. But, you know, her husband goes off to prison. Her presumed lover, you know, is gunned down and dies here. You know, it's not a great afterlife for Mrs. Richardson to go into after all this, but it was just learning that backstory. You know, again, you're kind of like, okay, she cheated on him. Obviously, murder's worse than cheating, but this was a relationship where neither one really kind of did things right. After getting that backstory as to why his wife would be so distant from him, why Mrs. Richardson would potentially fall into the arms of another man, I mean, honestly, as much as I hate cheating and infidelity, can you blame her? Her husband abandoned her, practically. She probably assumed he was never coming back. You know, it's almost like a divorce by abandonment. So, I mean, I don't even really know if she started seeing Jesse Hale, I don't even think I'd qualify it as cheating. She probably thought her husband abandoned her, was never coming back. And then he came back, and a short while later, August 15th, 1910, Aurliss Richardson comes in and guns down Jesse Hale in 4 bullets, so kind of a hail of bullets. And that's really the full story of just this ongoing. So many of these murder stories I've seen have just been these scumbag men who just are idiots, drunks, dope fiends, what have you. You know, they grew up in these homes where their dads abused them and raised them to be just violent pieces of shit. And they go on to marry and torment the people in their lives, and then the moment the tables get turned on them, they snap and they get more violent, and they go out and kill people that they hold responsible for their own stupid life decisions. That's why I do so many of these cases about, you know, especially husbands killing their wives or killing their wives' lovers, and usually it's brought on by something that the husband did. You know, it's a real depressing, tragic chapter in the history of Oregon. Is a lot of these, predominantly like 1900 to like, you know, the first half of the 20th century, is these husbands that did these just horrible things to their wives. And sure, there were some cases where some wives did some horrible things to their husbands, but obviously the violence from the men far outweighs the violence of the women in this history. So this is just another story in that vein. So as always, I'd like to thank you guys so much for watching. And the hell, I don't know if you could hear that. This guy was doing push-ups on one of these benches right here, and he was getting like really into it. He was like, and like I could hear it full well. So if you heard some like real grunting and groaning, it was just a guy. So anyway, again, thank you so much for watching. Remember to like, share, subscribe. Hit up my Patreon. I'm gonna get out of here because that guy's a little odd and he's a little too close to me. I don't really have a lot of good places to escape right now, except right back towards him. And hit up my Patreon. I don't know if I already said that, but if I didn't, say it again. If I did, I'll say it again. And all that. And as always, from the site of what would be the mouth of Washington Street coming down to the Willamette River, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian, and I will see you next time.